Big 10 Plus 4 is a member of Odd Pods Media and ASAP All Sports All Plays Network.
Welcome into Big 10 Plus 4, where we're blue collar and blue blood. Of course, we're college sports with a Midwest perspective as well. I'm Dalton Shetler, Sam Sprunger over there. This is our favorite time of the year. We've been talking about this for weeks coming up, but it's finally here, Sam, where we're getting ready to tip off the Ncaa Tourney.
I know, and I sang last week because that was the start of it. That was like Christmas Eve, I guess. I said it was like Christmas. That was more like Christmas Eve. It was the precursor to the big day, technically.
Well, and of course, we got a nice sliver of it with the Big 10 tournament that just took place. With the Big 10 tourney, we got to see a buzzer beater already. We'll talk about that in a moment. But we got to see a couple of runs that we weren't expecting. So we had kind of the appetizer as we now get into the big dance. And of course, the Big 10 with 9 teams into the NCAA tourney that leads the country yet again. A little bit different this time. A couple of years ago, you were talking about maybe 11, 12 teams getting in, and at the end, a couple dropped off. Here, 3 different teams just kind of slid in the back door to get into the big dance. But regardless, the Big 10 really kind of pounding its chest after this year.
Yeah, it was, excuse me, those runs that you were talking about. I'm not going to get into the necessary specifics until we get really into the breakdown of the tournament itself and kind of recapping it. But I think that earned a couple of teams some higher seeding or some solid, like in the tournament type movement when with their success in the tournament itself. And that's what I guess if there's any value to the conference tournament, we talked about that last week, where teams that are already in don't really necessarily have to hold it in high regard, but there are some teams that it's important, and I guess that's what makes it so exciting, because if you have some teams that are on the bubble and that and they perform, you wonder, hey, was this enough? And I was still kind of skeptical at one point, but then I got convinced that it was probably going to
happen. But as we were talking about too, the Big 10 tournament, we do have a champion. It's the Iowa Hawkeyes.
Boo.
They knocked off Sam's Purdue Boilermakers. Of course, if you're a loyal listener, Sam has an interest there. I have an interest in Michigan State, and I'm wearing my Final Four ball cap today. I was feeling the spirit.
Right.
Through the closet,
I
threw it on. I don't wear it a ton because it's white and I'm scared to make it dirty, but
the horridness of white hats. I used to I used to be one of those that if I bought a shirt, I had to make sure I had a hat that went with it, and if I didn't, I went and bought a hat. And the white hats, I would buy some white hats, and it would always make me mad because I sweat when it's 60. So if I put on a white hat and go outside, it gets that gross yellow after a while, and so I don't wear white hats anymore.
So this is a March only hat that it fits March Madness, and we'll keep it.
I get it. I get special occasion, kind of dressing up.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. Big 10 tournament though, Iowa wins it. They knock off Purdue. You already booed it, but your takeaway from what we saw in Indianapolis.
You and I text back and forth as much as we could during that tournament, and I tell you what, IU made their move and they secured themselves. Now we'll get to where they're at in the tournament a little bit later, but it took those wins strongly, and obviously by the seeding as well. It took those wins to get them into the tournament, and that's kind of what I was talking about just a couple of minutes ago, that it takes some wins, and IU did what they needed to do to get in. And I guess that's my biggest takeaway from it. There's some other things that I've got issue with when it comes to the NCAA tournament, or NCAA. I'm sorry. They want you to say both A's, I guess. But this tournament was a really good tournament. It wasn't as crazy upset wise, I guess, which there were some teams I think probably suffered from losing early in that tournament though too.
And I think you're right. And as you kind of mentioned, I was down there in Indianapolis for this one. Now, I've had 5 of these that I've been to in person, working, covering. This one was easily the most fun of
I
them
could
I've
see
been
that.
to. And part of it was with it being in Indianapolis, us both being from Indiana, I was
Mhm.
able to see some family members, see some friends, as I able to see a lot of people I know down
You
there.
didn't
But
see me down there. I
yeah,
didn't get the invite. Jeez.
well,
See where I rank.
you moved too far east is the problem with you.
Okay. Hey, it's still not that far away.
Well, that's the beauty of Indianapolis, to be completely honest about
Yeah.
that too.
The
But
whole reason why the whole tournament was there last year.
It's true.
Essentially.
And for 2020, of course, we had games Wednesday and then shoot around of Michigan Rutgers Thursday morning. They end up pulling the plug on all the postseason and the entire season. And then 21, it was family and limited fans, I think, were able to get in. This was the first year that it was back to everybody coming in. And there was an energy among the concourse, like as you walked in and out to try and get to different places. You just caught this buzz of fans excited, the energy they had. And honestly, this one kind of sealed it for me, where I was like, you know what, this tournament, this Big Ten tournament, this is one of the best fan events that exists, mainly because the Big Ten has the best fans in the country. And I don't think that can be disputed, especially when you look at attendance numbers. I mean, I'm always somebody who
Yeah.
likes to try and back stuff up with stats. The numbers show attendance is the strongest in the Midwest and with Big Ten sports. Maybe part of it's because we have no beach to go to. This is our beach in an arena. But everybody loves their school. There's so much school pride. They're always out there in numbers. And in Indianapolis, that was a thing. And it blew me away how awesome of a fan event it is. And you get to watch 13 basketball games over the course of 5 days. It's terrific.
And before anybody decides they're going to argue with you, you do a lot of traveling into arenas that aren't Big Ten arenas. And so you see, now there are your high ranking schools or programs that do show up in droves, but you go to a lot of places that you're like, oh, maybe this isn't as big of a crowd as what we were expecting. But I think pretty much almost every time Big Ten schools show up, and when you put all 14 teams in one place, you get some rabid, crazy fans, especially the ones that have to travel a little bit further than, let's say, Purdue or IU or Michigan State. Those closer ones, they still travel, and
Yep.
and it's crazy.
And that's what's amazing to me too, because I really noticed the difference. The first 2 Big Ten tourneys that I went to and worked were the ones that were in Washington, D.C. and New York City. And
Were those? I know they did it for the audience, to get that connection.
Maryland and Rutgers coming in not that long
but
after,
it couldn't have had the same feel as when it is in Chicago or in Indianapolis.
Not at all. And as games continued on, you started to get more and more fans to come in. But like, we would be in taxis heading over to games, and nobody knew that this was the thing. Like, the taxi drivers asking us what we're there for. We explain, and they're like, oh, there's basketball around. Is it high school? Is it like, I mean, it was so out of this world to people.
Why is the Big
them.
Ten in New York City, or why is the Big Ten in Washington, D.C.?
Yeah. I mean, it just was kind of befuddling. I think maybe there's an avenue that you could do it again in the future when it gets more traction, but without a doubt, your best will come when it's in Indianapolis and Chicago.
Well, and we know historically from the Big Ten tournament, it's always the last game before the selection show. Always. Like, they literally show the team celebrating, and then they go to Greg Gumbel and Clark Kellogg,
Right.
and that, like, immediately over. And when they were in New York City, it was horrible because the Big East has the stranglehold on Madison Square Garden.
Yep.
So they get it the week leading into Selection Sunday. So Purdue, the Big Ten had to play it the week before, and that felt way off.
And it messed up schedules for the regular season to make
Sure
that
it did.
happen. Like, there was a lot of variables that kind of interrupted. But no, this was a great tournament. We got to see some great games. Let's talk a little bit about those great games. You talked about the run from Indiana. Let's start there. The Hoosiers are able to pick off 2 wins against Michigan and then against top seed Illinois that essentially punched their ticket into the big dance. And I mean, you really can say that because they end up in Dayton for the first 4. And we'll talk about all the teams with the NCAA tournament in a little bit. But this Indiana run, I was there in the arena when it was 60-43 at Michigan on top of Indiana with 13 minutes left. And I looked over at a couple of my family members that I was sitting with, and I said, I think we can about wrap it up. I said this.
So you jinxed it. Thanks, Dalton.
Yes,
Jeez.
I did. Well, and because I said to them, I said, look, Indiana can't shoot their way back in this game. I said, Indiana is not a good shooting team. That's just point blank what it is. They can't afford this kind of deficit. And to be honest, they couldn't. They got all those. They got the stops defensively. They only gave up 2 or 3 baskets for the last 13 minutes of that game.
31-9 the run.
I mean, like that's incredible. They got it done on defense. And that
which in turn led to their offense.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it was all hand in hand.
Yeah. And I would say that is the bigger surprise, the win over Michigan, than the win over Illinois. And that's not me saying that, IU is as good as Illinois is. I just think they had, I guess I was a little bit surprised that there wasn't maybe a letdown against Illinois because of that big comeback. But the bigger surprise was them coming back and beating Michigan. I literally, and I kid you not, we were traveling and I was listening to it on the radio. I told my father-in-law, I said, I'm sorry, I'm doing work. and Michigan was up and we stopped for lunch. I went in, I ate, took my time, didn't hurry, nothing. Went back, came back out, turned it on, and Indiana was within 1. I'm like, are you kidding me?
I heard quite a few stories like that too. Another one of my uncles lives around Indianapolis and is an Indiana fan. And he had texted me earlier in the game and said, oh, it's this IU team that showed up. And so they start to
2 teams.
They start to make the run back, and I text the little eyeball emoji. I love doing that when something exciting is happening.
Yeah.
And he says he saw the emoji and then was walking his way home and got to the TV, and IU was down 1. And he's like, what just happened?
So he took a walk thinking, yeah, well, it was a good run. NIT it is,
Yeah. Missing the NCAA tourneys since 2016. And that's the big thing is Indiana needed this to get that monkey off its back. They really, really did. And you know what? They earned their way with that run in Indianapolis. They earned their way.
As much as it pains me,
I know it does.
I will argue for IU later on.
Ooh, okay.
I will argue for IU later on.
Okay.
Simple as that.
Good tease. Outside of Indiana, Iowa, of course, winning the Big Ten tourney was a pretty solid run.
And didn't surprise me.
No, me neither. And well, we had a week ago, we talked about Purdue, Iowa being the championship. I think he had Rutgers over Iowa, but
I still stand if they would have beaten Iowa, I think Rutgers would have been there.
Yep. Well, they would have played Indiana, so I'm totally in on that.
Yeah.
But Iowa right now is playing the best out of anybody else in the Big Ten Conference, point blank, period.
For sure.
And the way that they ran it up on Northwestern with 112 points, what they did to Rutgers, like they left no doubt in any of these games. The closest really was Indiana. Indiana gave them the dog
took
fight.
a buzzer beater, a game winner, I guess, because it wasn't right at the buzzer. But
semantics.
Yeah, 0.8 of a second is pretty much a buzzer beater.
Yeah.
When you've got to go 90 feet to get a good look at the hoop in 0.8 of a second, it's a buzzer beater. Right.
So Iowa's playing red hot. Indiana earns themselves a way into the big dance. Michigan State found themselves a little bit in Indianapolis. And
yes,
we had been waiting for a moment to see some traction, some where the team kicks it into 4-wheel drive and is getting ready for off-road. Like we were kind of waiting to see that, and we finally saw a little bit.
Do you feel better about Michigan State now after that?
Before?
Yeah, than well
100%.
before.
100%.
Yeah.
There still are inconsistencies with the team. That just is what it is.
I think every team, including Iowa, who's playing the best, all of them have inconsistencies.
Right. But maybe Michigan State's is larger, and that's why you feel maybe more nervous.
Sure.
But what you got to see, Marcus Bingham Jr. came alive in the second half against Wisconsin, collects his 4th double-double of the year. If he is able to play on the block, and it's really just about him staying down there in the post and creating that post presence, that changes things with this team. Now, A.J. Hoggard at point guard leaves the tournament with 20 assists and 2 turnovers. And
that's amazing. Wow.
Assist to turnover ratio of 10-1.
Unheard of.
I mean, and he scored a bunch against Purdue in the loss.
Mm-hmm.
You get that kind of play out of the point guard spot, it changes things. Like you watched in Indianapolis, Michigan State's ceiling of what they can do this upcoming weekend go from here to here, because you started to see some of the players and the growth kind of revive itself from November when it was a top 10 team and it was 14-2. You get those two areas like playing like that. This is a Michigan State team that might upset some folks in Carolina this upcoming weekend.
I can tell what you're doing with your pocket. Yeah.
Well, but that's the thing though. It's a risk. Like I'm going to be straight up honest with you. You can't bank on it. And we've seen that over a course of 30 games. And
you know what? This year, anything can happen.
It's true.
Which is what you're going to get from my bracket when we talk about it a little bit.
Okay.
You're going to go, what?
Okay.
And I'm going to say, it's this year.
Yeah. And that's kind of the truth. But I think those were the big storylines that came out of Indianapolis in the Big Ten tournament. So let's end up the first quarter and head over to the second, where we'll move on to the big dance.
Fair enough.
Okay, so the NCAA tournament, the first 4 games happening today, tomorrow, and then, of course, the field of 64, if you will be starting on Thursday. 9 teams in the big dance from the Big Ten. And I suppose we can kind of just start going through some of these and seeing maybe what surprised you. We can start with the 3 seeds, Purdue and Wisconsin. For Purdue, of course, they end up here at a 3 seed. Some people were kind of thinking they might have been closer to a 2. I think the real conversation Boilermaker fans were upset with is why they're going to Milwaukee instead of Indianapolis.
Yeah, that is my biggest thought, because you know what? Both of the Big Ten 3 seeds are playing in Milwaukee.
Yep.
One being Wisconsin. And when there's a 3 seed playing in Indianapolis, why isn't it Purdue?
Yep.
I don't know how the pods work to where, the regionalization of them, to where did it have to be a certain region that goes to Indianapolis? Because, there's West region teams playing in the East,
right,
in their first couple of rounds. So I don't understand that necessarily. And you know what? It doesn't matter. Purdue still travels well, and they'll travel well to Wisconsin. But if you're going to give Wisconsin, and maybe it's because Wisconsin won the regular season and they were giving them that little bit of a reward in the aspect of, you know what, they're going to stay a 3 seed because they did get beaten their first game in the tournament, Big Ten tournament, but they get to go stay in Milwaukee. But it just doesn't make sense to me. Why didn't Purdue get put in Indianapolis, since we're catering to teams? I mean, there are some lower seeds playing in Buffalo that could be, essentially it's a home game compared to who they're playing, and they're the lower seed, and it just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, Michigan's an 11th seed and they get to go to Indy. And so I think that's what
I've got issues with
Yeah.
that all in all anyways, but
we'll circle over to that in a moment, but I don't have an answer for you. I don't. and hopefully I'll try and get some clarification so we can know a little bit better why that ended up the way it is. But yeah, I that one stuck out to me too, because a lot of Purdue fans had been looking at it and saying, well, if we can go Indy the first weekend, and if we're lucky enough to make the Sweet 16, go to Chicago. Like, that's some of the sites set up. That's perfect for Purdue fans. But
now, granted, Milwaukee and Chicago aren't much different. I mean, it is different because it is a further drive to Milwaukee.
Yes.
But still, Milwaukee and Chicago, it's still setting up nicely for Purdue.
No,
no. They're not in the Midwest. Sorry, I apologize. They're in a different region.
Right.
Sorry, my fault.
But it still does set up nice in terms of the teams in front. I'll be honest, I have not seen a Yale basketball game yet. What I do know is they have a kid named Swain who's averaging about 20 points a game so far this year. He appears to be a pretty solid shooter when you look at the numbers. Don't know much about the Bulldogs besides that.
Is Tommy Amaker still their coach?
I don't believe so. I actually thought I had read somewhere.
Was he at Yale or Harvard?
Hang on 1 second.
I maybe he was Harvard, so I may be way wrong anyways. But
so Yale's basketball coach is James Jones,
former NBA player James Jones, or I mean that's a pretty common name, but
it's a different James Jones than
I assumed as much
than the Miami Heat one.
Yeah.
Amaker is at Harvard.
Okay, I see. Oh, sorry, Yale fans.
Yeah, I was gonna say you just really rubbed everybody off.
Good thing we're not the Ivy +4.
But
I'd know by then.
I do think Purdue has a path to the Sweet 16, but I think you start looking at that region and say Purdue beats Yale, say Texas beats Virginia Tech. I think it gets a little bit interesting when you add in Texas against Purdue, because Texas is strong on the wings. I've gotten to watch a little bit of Chris Beard's club, Andrew Jones, Marcus Carr, the former Minnesota Golden Gopher, transferred down there. They have some players on the perimeter that can make some noise, and I think that might be a tough recipe for Purdue, as we've seen throughout the year.
But you've also, and I know you'll back this up to the point where it's not just me being a homer. Purdue does not get blown out. The Michigan loss was an anomaly. I don't think that Purdue's going to get beat by double digits unless it's them fouling at the end and just not getting, kind of like the Big Ten championship, to where it wasn't a 9-point game, but that's what the final score was, because Purdue couldn't get a basket after they fouled, and then they'd foul again.
Right.
So I think they're going to give themselves opportunities, but I think even though they did struggle in a couple of in those 2 games leading to the championship, Purdue did get looking a little bit better offensively. They still aren't holding on to the ball, which just ticks me off beyond belief. But they held Iowa under 80 points, and I know that's they lost and gave up 70+ points, and you're happy about it. Well, Iowa's been tearing the roof off with their offense. You mentioned it earlier. They scored 112 against Northwestern.
Yep.
And I posted something on social media about that, just confirming I felt Iowa could make a really long run in the tournament.
Yep.
And somebody said, yeah, but they scored 112 against Northwestern. And my response was, okay, well then give me the list of the other teams that did that against Northwestern.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody did. Nobody. So to say that, well, they did it against Northwestern. Well, what about the other teams that are high offense? Purdue didn't score 112 against Northwestern.
And Keegan Murray is working himself now into a top 10 conversation for the NBA draft, maybe even closer to top 5. Like what he's done, especially during this stretch, I mean, it's remarkable. You don't see players do what he's doing.
And if it's not for Johnny Davis just playing out of his mind, and Keegan Murray's the player of the year in the Big Ten, I don't think.
You're gonna get some upset Illinois fans.
You know what? And I even said I preferred Kofi over everybody else. But you know what? I didn't get a chance to see Keegan Murray play as much as someone like you.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness. I watched every Iowa game.
He can do everything.
He can.
Everything.
He can include look like his brother.
Yeah, that's true. That did fool me once during the game. I did get tricked by
my
that.
sons were watching the championship game with me, and Chris got his 4th foul, and they're like, "Oh, that's big." I'm like, "Why? He's only scored 4 points at the time." I said, "Keegan's the one that we need to worry about."
And that's a scary thing too for the future is Fran McCaffrey over at Iowa is saying that Chris Murray's going to become like Keegan. He's just a little bit slower in development. So the Big Ten will be haunted by a Murray, it feels like, for a little while.
Oh, wow. I did before I moved jobs a few years back. I did like just going through from Eastside into Cal Eastern school districts before I moved away. I did the figuring out. It was like 40 years that there was a Sprunger constantly in DeKalb Eastern. It's going to be like that with Iowa. Well, you had my sister start, then my brother, then I went through, and by the time I graduated, my nephew had started kindergarten.
Wow.
Jordan, and then Tristan, and then Gavin, and it was like it might have been 35, but I think I was very similar. They're just going to constantly have a Murray.
I was gonna say the Sprungers and Yoders all over DeKalb County.
Yeah,
huh? That's
right. Although there was only one family of Sprungers.
I was gonna say that's a joke that folks in DeKalb County will really enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
But so that's a kind of look at Purdue. We'll quickly kind of move some of the others as normal. We end up getting kind of bogged down in an area we like to talk about. But Wisconsin ends up as a 3 seed as well. Wisconsin will go against Colgate. They're playing in their backyard in Milwaukee. And you look at the other potential matchup, it's LSU and Iowa State that they would play the winner of. LSU just fired their head coach, Will Wade. So when you really look at the teams with potential routes to a Sweet 16, to me, Wisconsin has the best.
Yeah, I wouldn't argue with that at all because LSU, I heard somebody comparing the LSU issue, like the fact that they started out really well and then they struggled in the conference season, and then they said now they're replacing their coach, and they compared them to Michigan in '89. Not the same team.
No.
I honestly I think that's gonna hurt LSU even more, and I have Iowa State beat in the first round.
I was going to say, and that's totally fair. I mean, if you're kind of trying to figure out your bracket, I mean, a team without a coach and that much inconsistency. And by the way, this is the second time they've been without Will Wade in the last few years in March Madness. I was going to say 2 years.
Yeah. And so, and I think it was the same issue, wasn't it? Like it broke. And so they suspended him indefinitely or, temporarily until they got it worked out. And then they brought him back. And then, of course, it comes up again. And they're like, yeah, we need to go.
Well, the fact that Will Wade lasted that long with all the different allegations and, matter of fact, evidence that sits against him has been quite frankly amazing. Illinois ends up a 4 seed. They're playing against Chattanooga in the first round, a 13 seed. You might remember Chattanooga from the buzzer-beating shot to win the conference tournament that knocked off Furman in that classic back and forth in that conference tournament. But for Chattanooga's got a couple of guys that have been able to score pretty well. But what really intrigues me here, too, is that they have Silvio De Sosa, which you might remember that name, the Kansas player who ended up suspended. But that's somebody, and a lot of these matchups, you're lucky to find anybody who's going to be able to stand with Kofi Coburn. Silvio De Sosa at least has a physical frame that can battle with Kofi, and that's normally not the case for such a high seed like this.
From my understanding, and I didn't pick it, but from my understanding, that's the sexiest double-digit upset pick.
Really?
Chattanooga over Illinois, because the comment was they have Power 5 talent on a non-Power 5 team. So they're low seeded because of that, but they have that Power 5 talent that has transferred, or they, under the radar got them to come to Chattanooga and, or over the radar. I don't care. I mean, whatever. But, I don't know. Can they beat Illinois? Sure. I think anybody can beat Illinois, or anybody can beat anybody. We've seen that, but, I don't see Illinois losing first round. I just don't.
And honestly, I like the Illinois team a lot. They bowed out
Yeah.
quickly in Indy, and I guess that's maybe why some people are souring. They have I really like the team. I like the 4-round-1 style they play. They need to. It feels like Alfonso Plummer was a little gun shy in Indianapolis. The kid needs to let it fly. If you get back to a swaggy, confident Alfonso Plummer is doing his bow and arrow celebration after each three, like Illinois will be a problem in this tournament. So we'll see how that plays. Iowa ends up a 5 seed. Iowa will start off against Richmond, the champs of the A10. They just knocked off Davidson in that conference tournament game. We've talked a lot about Iowa. This is a team I think not only is primed to maybe survive the 5-12 upset stereotype, but to be able to make a deep run.
Yeah, I without getting too deep into, I've got them going pretty far. And it's not because I've been talking. Well, it is because I've been talking about it so long, but it's because I believe that the offensive weapons, they're covering up their defensive problems with the ability to stay so high up on their offensive output. They're producing so much offensively that it's so hard to beat them because of that. And so I've got them making a deep run, and you may argue with my final destination for them, but it's a good team. I think they're underseeded.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't disagree with that. And honestly, I hate to say it because it doesn't make for great content, but we'll see, because I might end up agreeing with you. We'll talk about that in a little bit. A couple of 7 seeds out of the Big Ten, Michigan State, and of course, Michigan State ends up next to Duke. That seems just to be a rule, right?
Well, yeah, I think they've got some sort of an agreement that whatever region one is in, the other has to be somewhere in it. That way, you can play each other.
So Duke's the 2 there, but Michigan State first would have to try and get out of a first-round matchup with 10 seed Davidson, and this isn't easy. Bob McKillop's team really had a strong year this year. I think 27 wins. They have a Michigan State transfer on that Davidson team who leads the team in scoring, Foster Lawyer, averaging about 16 points a game. He was Mr. Basketball in the state of Michigan coming out of high school. But for Davidson, they also have a kid named Hungjun Lee. And Hungjun Lee is a player from South Korea. Last year, he became just the 11th player in D1 basketball history to shoot 50% from the field, 40% from 3, and 90% from the free throw line.
Good Lord.
I mean, he was in the 50, 40, 90 club. You pair him with Foster Lawyer and Luka Brajkovic, who's their 6'10 big guy who can kind of stretch out, and it's not so position centered or stereotyped. Like he can move a bit as a big guy. It's a dangerous 10 seed, the Davidson Wildcats.
So that explains so much your text of "we got Davidson," like you were not happy about it at all.
No, that's a tough matchup. So I do think their guards and their perimeter, I think it's going to be a different look going against Michigan State's size out there on the perimeter. I'm not sure that that's something that they'll be ready for. I don't know how you get ready for that from the A10 and as big as Michigan. Like Max Christie's playing the 2 and he's 6'6". Like AJ Hogarth's probably going to start at point guard with Tyson Walker's injury. He's 6'4". Like little different. You know what I mean?
Right.
So we'll see how that plays. The other 7 seed is interesting too, and we're going to go long here in this segment for everybody to know. And we'll be shorter in the second half. But
going a little overtime in the first half.
Yeah. Ohio State ends up a 7 seed. They get Loyola Chicago, and to me, this has Ramblers moving on written all over it. And if you're an Ohio State fan and you're upset with me saying that, please understand it's because your own team's health is in such peril.
When I go to bed because I'm so exhausted with Ohio State up 9 at the half, and I wake up and I'm like, Purdue plays Penn State?
Yep.
Now, granted, Penn State did play well, but by no means should you blow that big of a lead without some sort of a meltdown on your side. And I can't do it now.
Well, and it's been confirmed Justice Suing, who's only gotten to play in 2 games this year, won't be playing in the tournament.
Which kills him.
Zed Key, it looks like might be back. He's a question mark, but he's had the ankle injury. Poor Kyle Young still just continues to deal with concussion symptoms and everything else. They'll see if they can get him back, but like nonetheless, like that's a lot, and it's a lot of big guys. So you're going to roll out Joey Brunk, and you have EJ Liddell at the 4, but like you don't have a lot of depth in one big area of your team right now.
Well, and excuse me, I'm sorry. They can only, those two, Branham and Liddell, can only do so much. They have to have some sort of a supporting role, and if it's injuries are killing your support role or your support cast, I don't know how you're gonna do anything. And when you get one of those teams they're almost the Gonzaga 2.0, to where they're Loyola Chicago is so far always a double seeded team, but they're always a threat to win. I picked them to win. I just don't see Ohio State having enough, and they haven't done anything to prove that they're going to improve that. I won't be upset. Well, I kind of will be upset because I have Loyola Chicago going to the Sweet 16. I have them beating Villanova. Not that I discount, Villanova being good, but traditionally, and Loyola Chicago's strong.
Yep.
And Ohio State just drew the wrong team in the first round, in my opinion.
No, it's true. And for everybody who fell in love with Sister Jean and Loyola Chicago making the Sweet 16 run last year, and everybody loved Krutwig, maybe more so because he likened Farva from Super Troopers than a dominant D1 basketball player. Right. But Krutwig has moved on. They do have a trio of guys that are pretty solid in Lucas Williamson, Braden Norris, and Ugwak. Ugwak was the other one. They're big guy. They do bring a lot of experience with a relatively young coach, Drew Valentine, who's just 30 years old, the youngest coach in D1 basketball. And of course, this is his first year. Porter Moser was there last year, took him to the Sweet 16. He's now at Oklahoma.
Well, and what was it? 3 years ago, they went to the Final Four.
Yeah.
With Sister Jean. That was the whole thing. Sister Jean was, their mascot, so to speak, I guess, their good luck, charm. But yeah, I mean, and I've seen their coach linked to now Kansas State since Bruce Weber resigned.
Oh, he's going to be a hot coach for a while. I mean, it's going to be a name to pay attention to. Michigan, an 11 seed, gets to play in Indianapolis, and they draw 6 seed Colorado State. Colorado State's got 2 guys that score in double digits and are pretty strong. Up in, I think one of them scores around 16, 20 points a game. But it's a team that slows the pace down. They want less and less possessions in the game. It'll be interesting to see how Michigan tries to speed them up in this first round matchup.
Well, and I think it all depends on how the shots are falling for Michigan starting out, and if they're not able to jump out to a little bit of a cushion to where they can push Colorado State to keep going, to get it going and get that back and forth to where it really benefits Michigan, they're in trouble. I have so many problems with Michigan where they're at. Here's the thing. They were up by
List them. Go for
85 points against IU in the second half with 12 minutes to go and end up losing the game. And to me, those two teams, I even said it last week, it could have been one of those, the loser doesn't make it. So to me, that means whoever wins should have the higher seed, should have the more solid ground. IU won that game hands up. Michigan did their part in losing it. Don't get me wrong, but IU came back and won that game. They went and won yet another one. I don't think Michigan touches Illinois, but IU went in and beat Illinois, and they have a first 4 game, but Michigan has a solid first round game. They don't have to play in. They automatically get it. I hope Colorado State just pummels them. And it's not, I'm not a Michigan advocate anyways, and I'm definitely not an IU advocate. I mean, come on. but there is no reason Michigan should have been an 11 seed over IU being a 12. It just shouldn't have happened. And if IU was going to be a 12, they certainly shouldn't have to play a first or a first four game to get into the field of 64. The committee dropped the ball huge on that one.
I don't have any kind of counter. I mean, I just sat there and kind of nodded along because I don't. I mean, I'm not really sure what to tell you. I really don't know. Real quick though, you bring up Indiana. They are in the first four, as you mentioned. They get Wyoming tonight. That one tips off just past 9:00. Indiana, Wyoming. Do the Hoosiers maybe have enough where they're able to keep this run alive that they had in Indianapolis? Now, remember, the Hoosiers they're not a great shooting team. They're going to get it done defensively, and they're going to play through Trace Jackson Davis.
Well, I can say that tonight will be much like a home game for IU because Dayton's right next door, just across the state line, basically. I mean,
and these fans are hungry.
Oh, for sure. It's been years since they've been to the tournament, so they want to see their team play. So I think that is huge for IU because Bloomington to Indianapolis is really short too. So granted, there were fans from all schools, but IU and Purdue probably produced most of the crowd, or a larger portion of the crowd. Let's say it that way. So I think that helps. I've honestly watched a little bit of Wyoming, and they're pretty solid. But yeah, honestly, I think probably IU wins this. I don't have the winner of this game moving on there. I don't have them being the 5-12 upset in a tournament tournament, but yeah, I think IU could. I honestly, if I had to pick it, which it sounds like you're pushing me to it. I heard it in your voice.
Yes.
I'll pick IU.
Okay. Good enough. And then tomorrow you have Rutgers and Notre Dame in a first four matchup. That's kind of interesting to me. What do you see here?
This committee is killing me. You have a team that finished 8th in the conference who doesn't have to and lost their first game a round before Rutgers, and they they don't have to play and again, that's a knock on the seeding of Michigan.
Yep.
I don't know anybody on Michigan's team, so it's nothing against them personally. I don't care about that part necessarily, but it doesn't make sense over the course of a whole conference season. And granted, Rutgers lost to Lafayette and UMass and some of those really poor programs at the time, but there, you mentioned it too. As the season went on, that's a different team. That's not the same team that lost to those teams at the beginning. So to me, it makes no sense. Even though Rutgers lost their first game too, it was still in a round later, and it was to the eventual conference champion, tournament champion, and it was only by 10.
And
I just don't understand.
I had thought Notre Dame had done enough to move away from the
Me
first
too.
four.
Didn't they finish second in the ACC regular season? And they're
maybe tied for second. Yeah,
but still.
Yeah, and Rutgers finished 4th in the Big Ten. So I'm not really sure. Like, this is a really good matchup for a first four game, and it's really great for TV.
I'd hate to think that they did it for that. I would hate to think they did it for that.
But Rutgers and Notre Dame, this is one that I think is very interesting because you have, to put it kind of in your picture frame, a Jaden Ivey-esque player at Notre Dame and Blake Wesley, a South Bend product. I think he brings a level of athleticism that really isn't there on the floor. For Rutgers, I think you have more of a unit. And of course, you have some other pieces at Notre Dame, but to the level of Ron Harper Jr., Geo Baker, Omori, and Mulcahy, I'm not quite sure. I think Rutgers is a more complete team, to be quite frank.
Well, I again, sounds like you're pressuring me into picking a winner on this one, Dalton, but I'll take Rutgers on this. I'm going Big Ten on both of these games, and it's not because I have anything against the other two. And especially, I don't hate Notre Dame basketball like I do their football team.
Right.
But I like both Big Ten teams tonight because they're playing well at the right time.
We have an all
as
Big
well.
Ten Final Four, just for a spoiler alert. No, I'm kidding.
I don't.
I was going to say I don't either. All right. So a very long first half. Let's hit the halftime break.
Well, you got to give me a second to get over there. All right. Halftime. You are listening to Big Ten Plus 4, hosted on Anchor and StreamYard.
Hey, this is Russ.
This is Kyle.
This is Michelle.
From the Infectious Groove Podcast. Join us every Monday for the most fun you can have with a music podcast. The Infectious Groove Podcast uses a positive and fun approach as we take time every week to share our jammy jams, then dig into a thought-provoking topic discussing all decades and genres of music. You can find the Infectious Groove Podcast on all major podcast platforms, or you can head to infectiousgroovepodcast.com to find us there and subscribe. We might have a controversial opinion here or there, but we always have fun with it.
Oh, I'm sure I'll say something dumb.
Subscribe to the Infectious Groove Podcast, part of the Odd Pods Media Network.
Hi, I'm Tina Jaramillo.
And I'm Hillary Doherty.
And we host the Muck Podcast, where we discuss the dark and sometimes weird true stories in American politics.
Hey, Tina, did you know that Elvis crashed the Nixon White House for the sole purpose of getting a DEA badge? And it worked?
What? Or how a gun control advocate senator out of California engaged in gun trafficking with notorious gang leader Shrimp Boy?
Shrimp Boy, I remember him. Okay, so, we cover all of that and more from maladies, madness, mischief, and murder in U.S. politics.
And we also host a bi-weekly interview segment called Lil Muck.
We interview politicians, journalists, activists, and others who share their experiences in politics.
Find the Muck Podcast wherever you listen to podcasts and check us out on social media at the Muck Podcast.
All right. Second half, third quarter action here.
Yeah.
We're going to, we both, or actually Sam really has taken the time to fill out a bracket yet. I am really behind the ball. So I've looked at some matchups. I'll kind of maybe grade Sam, see where I think maybe he's off on, and maybe even kind of give my projections shooting from the hip here. But before we do that, let's go to social media, because at Big Ten Plus 4 is a little busy this week, Sam.
Yeah, we our poll from last week was the surprise seeding of the Big Ten tournament. Our winner was Rutgers. More people were surprised by Rutgers. Wisconsin was a close second. I don't have the numbers right on my hand, but the new poll question this week, and I'm just keeping it going. The new poll question this week is, now that the brackets are set, which Big Ten team has the best road/chance to get to the Final Four? We have 4 options, and if your option that you choose is not one listed, go in and put in the comments. But we have 3-seeded Purdue, 3-seeded Wisconsin, 4-seeded Illinois, or 5-seeded Iowa.
To me, I'm trying to remember what Illinois might run into if they get the win against Chattanooga in the first round, but Wisconsin has the easiest road to the Sweet 16 in my eyes. Iowa might have the best road to the Final Four in my eyes.
I don't disagree necessarily.
I'll pull up a bracket to see what I think of Illinois, where with the teams that surround them, but Purdue might have the toughest, to be quite frank, because if Purdue does beat Yale, they have the winner between Texas and Virginia Tech. I've already kind of stated why I think Texas is a little bit of a matchup issue for Purdue.
Yeah.
And then if you get by that, you go against maybe the best big man in the country, in Oscar Tshiebwe at Kentucky.
Oscar and Travion.
I'm
so excited if that happens.
Oh, it's going to be so much just mass thrown around.
There's so much testosterone in the paint. They'll just have to just step back and let it go.
I mean, it would be absolutely wild. But Tshiebwe is like a walking just rebound. He gets so many 20 rebound games. Like I think Purdue. Yeah. I think Purdue has some issues, and I had stated well before that I had concerns about this team because no team ranks as bad defensively in the Ken Palm rankings as Purdue historically that's been able to ever make a run. I still am a little bit worried. And then when you look at Texas and a possible Kentucky in the second round Sweet 16 matchups, I think they might have the hardest.
But my question is we've seen what Purdue did against Illinois, and one of the best big men in the country there with Coburn too. They were able to get him in foul trouble. I think if they end up in against Kentucky, it could be one of those. If they can get Oscar into foul trouble, it might help them immensely.
You're not wrong, but I would point out too that in the last couple of weeks, Ty Washington has really come alive for the Wildcats. Like this is somebody on the perimeter too. I think Kentucky is a bit of a matchup nightmare, I suppose, for Purdue in the sense that they have athleticism there on the perimeter that's going to be tough for them to guard. So I don't like Purdue's path.
I still haven't seen Purdue get blown out other than against Michigan. So I think it stays close, and you never know which way the ball's. And Purdue has to be the most shell-shocked team when it comes to losses all year. I mean, how many other teams have lost 4 of their 7 losses, or a majority of their losses have come on game winners or buzzer beaters? So we talked about that last week. Purdue's a few bounces away from only having 2 or 3 losses, period.
Correct. And
so it's one of those that even though their big deficiency is on defense, they're going to put themselves into position to win.
And to your point, I don't think Purdue's ever at risk of being blown out. They're too talented to spot that many points. But I do worry that they don't help themselves enough with the defensive issues they have.
And the way they held onto the ball, especially against Iowa. You talked about I forget who the point guard was. You said 20 assists and 2 turnovers.
AJ Hoggard at Michigan State.
Yeah. Eric Hunter Jr. had 2 turnovers in successive possessions against Iowa.
Oh, well, let's not go back to the Michigan State Maryland game for a moment, but where there was about 7 turnovers in the final 2 or 3 minutes. That was woof. But no, and to be honest, that's kind of Purdue's problem. It's a lot of different pieces in trying to figure out how it all fits, because Purdue wants Jaden Ivey to run the offense and be the offense a lot of times because of Eric Hunter and Isaiah Thompson aren't the most elite point guards that you could throw out there. So they're trying
way to put it.
Yeah, I was being very delicate because I like Eric Hunter's game, to be honest, too. I just don't like him running the point.
Yeah.
I mean,
he's a good off guard.
Yeah, that's how I see it. But like the team needs a point guard to run the offense, and
Jaden Ivey is not good enough to do it.
Well,
as a point guard.
You're taking away from some of his natural game on the wing if you make him run the point. And so I feel like that's kind of the waltz, the dance that Matt Painter and the Boilermakers have been trying to figure out recently. Real quick to look at Illinois. So Illinois has Chattanooga first round. If they win,
they're in Arizona's bracket.
Yes, they are.
Houston, Arizona, Tennessee, Villanova. Those are.
Which, if they match up against Arizona, I really like Arizona there. I mean, they're just so athletic. I think it'd be some issues for some of the bigs at Illinois.
I don't disagree.
But if they get there, I mean, they have Houston in the second round if both of those two teams win. Stat nerds love Houston. Houston, by the Ken Palm adjusted rankings, is a top 10 team, I think, both offensively and defensively, maybe top 15. I haven't watched enough of Houston this year to really know what they look like, but I know
they're red and white. That's
it. And Kelvin Sampson's the coach.
Yeah, he used to be at IU, so I don't like him.
Still wearing red and white.
That's right, jerk.
But Illinois, maybe Illinois has the hardest. I've kind of pivoted the poll question here, but
that's okay. It's fine.
Illinois and Purdue, I think, might have the 2 toughest roads. I think, though, Iowa has the best of the Final Four. Wisconsin has the best of the Sweet 16.
Wow. So it's harder for Iowa to get to the Sweet 16, but you think if they get there, it's easier to get to the Final Four.
That's how I see it.
It makes sense. And I don't necessarily disagree. My bracket disagrees with you a little bit, but
get into your bracket.
Yeah. I wanted to kind of cover, I pit it's never a clean tournament. Okay. So double-digit seeds. I have 2 making it to the Sweet 16. I have Loyola Chicago. I have them knocking off Villanova in the second round. And another my deepest one, I have New Mexico State getting to the Sweet 16.
Interesting.
I have them beating UConn and then Arkansas and then losing to Gonzaga.
Wow. Okay.
Although my biggest upset, I have South Dakota State beating Providence in the first round.
Providence has kind of been living on borrowed time for a little bit.
When your coach says you're lucky or they're lucky in a presser, it's not that he doesn't believe in them, but he kind of, maybe we're doing this with a little bit of smoke and mirrors. And when you get somebody like South Dakota State, who hasn't lost in like 45 years, I think, the way it sounds, they went undefeated in the regular season in the Summit League and won the tournament. They're like 30-4, and that Summit League teams, or those types of really low conferences, whenever they get a team that does that, it's usually because they have a lot of senior leadership. They do the small things right, and they set up perfectly to upset a team that maybe is doing a little bit of smoke and mirrors.
No, you're absolutely right. So what does your Final Four look like?
Oh goodness, Dalton, you're gonna love this. I have 2 3 seeds, a 1 seed, and a 2 seed.
Oh, okay. What we got?
Okay, I have Gonzaga.
Maybe I'm just a sucker for Gonzaga, but gosh, I love them. Chet, Timmy, I
have them beating Texas Tech in the Elite Eight to get to the Final Four.
Okay.
So Texas Tech is one of those that they play such good defense that if they can get a little bit of offense, they're really, really dangerous. And now that Chris Beard is not there any longer, I don't hate Texas Tech.
I didn't know you had a Chris Beard issue.
The reason why I have a Chris Beard issue is because when he was at Arkansas Little Rock, they beat Purdue in the first round, and he acted like he'd never won a basketball game before. He was doing basically cartwheels on the floor, and it was like, dude, come on. You're a coach. Granted, be excited, be cheerful, but my gosh, to me, it put a sour taste in my mouth. So, and it killed me a few years back. The year before Purdue made the run to the Elite Eight, Purdue played Texas Tech in Boston in the tournament, and Texas Tech just blew them out. And of course, Chris Beard was there.
Yep.
And so, I don't like Chris Beard. Okay, so I hope if they play Texas, they blow their doors off, but whatever. I'm going to get to who they're playing last. I have Tennessee coming out of Arizona, the Arizona region, the South. Okay. They showed a lot. You beat Kentucky twice. That's a pretty solid team, and they won the tournament for the first time in my lifetime, because they literally, the last time they won the SEC tournament was 1979, which was before I was born.
That's Magic Johnson and Larry Bird year.
Magic Johnson and Larry Bird year. That was the last time they won the SEC tournament, and for them to do that, and I think it sets up well. I have them beating Illinois in the Elite Eight.
Okay.
Believe it or not. I do have Illinois beating Arizona. That was one of those I sat there and stared at for about 4 minutes, just going, well, and then I'd tap one and go, nope, and switch it. And then switch it.
If we get an Arizona-Illinois rematch from 2005, one of the best March Madness games we've ever seen, that would be something.
Yeah. But so I have Illinois winning that, but getting beat by Tennessee. Tennessee going to the Final Four. Then I have an SEC matchup for that game in the Final Four, because I have Auburn coming out of the Midwest. I have them beating Iowa in the Elite Eight.
Jabari Smith, the real deal. That's what would scare me too if you were to try and ride Iowa to the Final Four, which I'm probably going to do in my bracket. If they do end up playing Auburn and Jabari Smith, not too many people are going to be able to slow him down.
And that's what I kept waiting. I stared at that one for 2 minutes, not half as long as the Arizona Illinois game or matchup, but it was still like, I could see. I had Iowa picked, then I switched to Auburn, then I switched to Iowa, then I switched to Auburn, and finally I was like, no, I'm pretty confident that even though they lost in the first round of the SEC tournament, to me, again, we don't put a lot of stock into it for those teams that are already elite. So I have Auburn winning and going to play Tennessee. Now for my fourth one, this is where I'm going to probably lose you. I have this team beating St. Mary's in the Elite Eight.
You put Purdue in.
I put Purdue in.
Yeah, I know.
But my point, here's the thing. I don't consider it necessarily homeristic, because Purdue has the horses to get there.
It's true.
I mean, and I'm just taking stock. Maybe it's a little bit of homerism just because I want it to happen. but it's not so out in left field or out of left field that it's like, oh my gosh, you ruined your bracket.
Well, but in terms of talent, I would stack Purdue's up against Baylor's, the 1 seed there. I would stack it up against Kentucky. It would literally be groundbreaking, literally breaking the ground. In terms of such a bad defensive metric team.
Sure.
Breaking that barrier. And barriers get broken, so it's not that it's impossible. That's my big hang up on it is I've seen a lot of really good teams lose here because they don't play defense, and this is where they grade out. Purdue's in that category, so they would have to become an anomaly, and that's possible.
I'm taking stock in the fact that they're never out of a game, that they're gonna hit those shots, or those game winners are not going in. Granted, I'm kind of going against the grain on that, but I do have Purdue beating St. Mary's in the Elite Eight.
So the Purdue team that's been cursed in March forever, you have in a year they've been cursed all year during the regular season, that the curse gets broken now.
It's a crazy year, Dalton. So yes.
Fair enough.
So my winners in the Final Four, I have Gonzaga winning against Purdue. So There you go. At least I'm not totally homeristic. And then I have Auburn beating Tennessee. I just really, really like Auburn. I really do. And in the finals, I have Auburn winning at 72-68.
Wow. Okay.
Auburn Tigers, national champions.
Bruce Pearl, national champion.
Yeah. And you know what? That's a rematch. He's playing against a school that he used to coach at with Tennessee, and I think he breaks through. And I like Bruce Pearl. I really do. I loved when he did the whole partying with, or cheering with the student section during I believe it was a women's game. He went there and cheered at Tennessee.
Yeah,
he was at Tennessee and was in the crowd, and I think he even took his shirt off or something. Like it was crazy. I love coaches that get involved.
Yep.
Now, I know I just said Chris Beard, I don't like him, but he did that while he was coaching on the court. That's right. There's a difference there.
There's levels to this.
Yeah, I've got Auburn.
Okay, very good. Well, we'll see how this ends up playing out. I'm sure in just about a week or so, we'll light or maybe a few days, we'll light all. I was
going to say by Thursday afternoon, the first round of games. I'll be throwing my bracket out the window.
Well, with that being said, let's move to the fourth quarter. This is the part of the show where we get to our headlines, and so we'll start with Sam Sprunger and the Sam Sentinel.
Hey, that's me. So, my Sam Sentinel is it's NCAA or NCAA tournament related. It's the greatest tribute / moment in NCAA tournament history to me. Okay. Take you to 1990, the tournament in 1990. That would be the year that UNLV, the Runnin' Rebs, won the national championship. A year after Michigan beat Seton Hall in overtime, I believe in Seattle, maybe. There was, and I don't know, you were not alive. I know you weren't alive, but Hank Gathers played for Loyola Marymount, and they were, I believe, in the WAC, and it was that team was the run and gun. They were averaging like over 100 points, and it was, I forget the guy's, the coach's name. It's not Paul Westphal. I know that's not right, but Westhead.
Okay.
He ended up going to Denver and coaching the Nuggets for a while, and the Nuggets averaged like 140 points a game, regulation points a game. They didn't win a lot, but they scored a lot. But anyways, go back to 1990. He's the coach at Loyola Marymount, and he started the run and gun basically. They were shooting the ball within 6 seconds, 7 seconds of the shot clock start. At the time, it was 45-second shot clock, but time evolves and they get closer in the shot clock. But Hank Gathers had a heart condition, and he had to take medication for it. But he found him, and Hank Gathers was a National Player of the Year candidate. Like, he was that good. He was gonna be a lottery pick. His teammate Bo Kimball, those two were just fantastic. Loyola Marymount was going to do some big things for a team that was not well known, and it was because of this offensive strategy. He had a heart condition, Hank gathers, and he found that when he took his medication, he got sluggish. So he stopped taking his medication, started being able to keep up with the pace of the offense, and in the middle of their tournament game, he collapsed on the floor, rushed to the hospital where he died.
Mm-hmm.
That was it was a big deal. You have a kid at the time, a kid dying on the floor, not on the floor, but dying because of playing basketball. And they canceled the rest of the tournament, gave Loyola Marymount the automatic bid. Rightfully, they would have won it anyways. And I think that maybe the conference already knew that anyways, so they just kind of conceded that they were their champion. They scored the most points against the defending champion in the tournament against Michigan. I believe they scored 130 plus points. The tribute, though, comes from Bo Kimball. Bo Kimball is a right-handed shooter. Hank Gathers was a left-handed shooter. In the middle of a very hotly contested game against the defending national champions, who should have beaten Loyola Marymount, Bo Kimball decided to give a tribute to his brother in arms, his teammate, his best friend. He shot his free throws left-handed during that time. And it was one of those, it wasn't him showing off. It was him showing his love for the person that had gone through just those times with him. And it showed his love for that man that tragically lost his life playing the game of basketball. And that was 32 years ago. And it seems like, and honestly, it's one of those that it seems like it wasn't too long ago, a couple years to me, because I remember watching it and go, oh my gosh, he's not left-handed. And I was a geek when, I knew everything about most of the teams in the tournament, which meant I did horribly in my predictions, which
correct.
Now I don't know anything and I still do horribly. So I don't know, maybe it didn't mean anything, but what a tribute. And he didn't care the situation. He was shooting his first free throws in honor of his friend and his brother. Bo Kimball and Hank Gathers. That is the best NCAA tournament tribute or moment that I've witnessed in my life. And that's the Sam Sentinel.
It's pretty special. I learned about that not terribly long ago, the whole Hank Gather story and whatnot. Yeah. And it's touching. I mean, it really is.
I can remember watching, and we didn't have cable, and all the tournaments weren't on like they are now. And so, like, I remember watching the next day on, I believe, Good Morning America, where they were doing the headlines, the news headlines or whatever. And they showed Gathers. He dunked it on an alley-oop, started running down court, and collapsed at half court. And I was like, oh my goodness. And then all of a sudden, everybody just stopped and rushed to him. And then, of course, they had said that he had passed when they got him to the hospital. And
it's crazy.
And take care of yourself. I mean, granted, I know that it's one of those things that, basketball or sport might be your life, but if you don't have your life, you don't have your sport. So if it's something that's making you sluggish, take your medication. If that's going to keep you alive. He had two options. He could not take the medication, but he couldn't play basketball. And he decided to not take his medication and still play basketball. And he ended up paying the ultimate price, but the tribute is what really got me.
It's pretty special stuff. It really is. For the Dalton Daily, it won't be nearly as sentimental. But news broke out of Evanston yesterday that athletic director Derek Gregg is going to bring head coach Chris Collins back for Northwestern basketball for another season. And they released a statement from the athletic department, and they basically had said, look, the recent performance and results isn't really up to where we want it. We've tasked Chris Collins with bringing more success in the new year. And the way I look at it, because I've been talking with people for a little while and trying to figure out if Chris Collins really is on a hot seat, because there's been some of that chatter a little bit. Chris Collins took you to your only NCAA tournament appearance. That was in 2017.
And won a game.
Won a game the first round and
Should've
nearly
beat
knocked off
Gonzaga.
Gonzaga in the second. But there was the missed call where the Gonzaga defender stuck his arm through the rim and blocked a shot. And Chris Collins got teed up for it because afterwards, I mean, they didn't see it in live time. The refs didn't see it. They didn't review it. They didn't change it. The way as I look at the situation in Evanston, Chris Collins has built something where it's moved the program further along than where it was when he got there. And I'm not really sure in a conference in the Big Ten where we're talking about a couple of years ago, 12 different teams possibly getting in. The last 2 years, 9 teams get in. The Big Ten is just as competitive, just as cutthroat as any other conference in the country. What is a reasonable expectation for you to throw on Chris Collins in the toughest, deepest conference in college basketball that's not already making and taking you to your only NCAA tournament appearance? I understand that losing is not the most fun, but also winning is incredibly difficult, especially when you're stacked behind the 8 ball between all the programs with all these different resources and as talented as this conference is. So I do applaud giving him an extra year. I don't want to see Chris Collins go because I think he's done a lot of good for that Northwestern program. And as the Big Ten, we're getting ready to see, I think, an overhaul. And this is all pending transfer portal and what happens, but an overhaul of talent in the Big Ten Conference. A lot of faces and names that we know are about to be gone. And there will be a little bit of a vacuum in the Big Ten. If Northwestern's able to keep some of that roster together, from COVID year eligibility and whatnot, Northwestern absolutely can make a run to maybe halfway or the top half of the Big Ten Conference in terms of standings with that roster. So I think it's a good move keeping Collins around, and I'm glad they made that decision because, again, he moved you further than where you were when he got there. So good move by Northwestern, and I hope for success for them in that program moving forward.
Well, and who else do you get? You know, I mean, Northwestern, if you said if they could get in the top half of the conference, it's traditionally you've seen if you're in the top half of the 14-team Big Ten, you're going to make the tournament.
Yep.
So you're absolutely right. There's a lot of talent that's not going to be there in the next year, 2 years even. And Northwestern doesn't recruit the same people as the rest of the rest of the league, and so they're going to have a lot of older players, which I talked about it when I said South Dakota State's going to beat Providence. They have senior leadership. I think Northwestern is kind of a small conference team in the Big Ten.
Yep.
So every few years they're really, really strong, not always enough to get to the tournament, obviously, since they've only done it once ever, but they're much like a small conference team in the Big Ten.
Yep. No, I agree. So I'm glad to see that they gave him an extra year.
Yeah.
All right. We're getting ready to say goodbye. Sam, let everybody know where they can find us.
Yeah. Hey, first off, we're on the ASAP network. All Sports, All Plays, they allow us to stream on their website and on their Facebook Live page. You can catch us whenever we're on, which during the basketball season and a little bit less during the football season, I'm guessing, because all games play on Saturday that way. We're a little hit or miss on the days. Like today's Tuesday. We did last week on Wednesday. We've done the 2 weeks prior to that on a Friday. We don't know because of the basketball season. We're still going to get you a weekly show.
You see these bags under my eyes, guys?
Yeah,
I mean, come on, like it.
Yeah,
I'm kidding.
He's not doing that because he's playing video games, kids. But no, catch us anywhere. You can they'll restream us, replay us on the ASAP network. If you absolutely want to watch the video of us, but don't want to wait for the replay on ASAP, hey, our video podcast is on Spotify, but you can listen to it audio on Spotify or anywhere else you find your podcasts for audio. Find us on Twitter, right up there at the top of the screen. Twitter, Facebook, oddpodsmedia.com. We really are having a good time, Dalton. I'm loving this. I'm able to talk sports every week with somebody that's knows a heck of a lot more than I do, but you don't make fun of me too much. You didn't even make fun of my Purdue Final Four pick. I'm proud of you.
Well, the thing is, I could possibly see it, but it just, you know,
you don't agree with it, but you don't see it out of the realm of possibility. Well, you don't see it as in it's gonna happen. You don't think it will, but it could.
It could. It very well could. But yeah, no, this is March Madness. We hope to have a lot of fun with you guys during the run through the big dance. And for this week's show and for Big 10 Plus 4, I'm Dalton Shetler. That's Sam Sprunger is your name, I think.
Yeah,
Sam
it
Sprunger.
is. Yeah,
Sam Sprunger.
it's on the screen.
Yeah, good enough. So long. We'll talk to you soon.
See you later.